So welcome to the next in our series of Organizational Mastery, a leader's guide to future-ready learning. I continue to chronicle my research and those I spoke to in the process, and I'm very, very honored to be joined by Nigel Paine, by Dr. Nigel Paine, who is not only a practitioner, researcher, but also my mentor and friend. And I'm very, very grateful that Nigel is here because Nigel is also coming out with a new book where we go into the details of organizational learning and talk about what the future of learning means for L&D professionals and the direction of our profession. So, Nigel, I'm going to start by welcoming you and thanking you again for doing this with me, and start with a very loaded question. What do you see now as organizational learning?
It's a great question. If I can't answer this, Serena, I'm in big, big trouble. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And it is on the cusp of the book being released. So anything that I say and hear is all going to be available in the book when it comes out later in September. What is organizational learning? It's based on a number of premises, which I hope are reasonable premises. And that is that if we can make sure that the staff in an organization, the people in the organization know what the organization knows, then the speed of movement, the ability to solve problems, deal with complexity, be agile and nimble, it accelerates dramatically. Because my perception, the thing that kind of started me off on this journey with organizational learning, partly the research from the 90s and the early 2000s, which we've kind of forgotten about, partly that, but partly this incredible sense of frustration as I watched organizations reinventing the wheel again and again and again, doing things that they knew, but didn't quite work out why they knew it, how they knew it, or they didn't have permission to know it. And all of those things struck me as being ridiculous. And the fact that we know about learning, we know that particularly adults learn better in groups, they learn better connected with each other. That if we can extend these connections, if we can make the unit within an organization, the group or the team, and not the individual, take the pressure off the individual to deliver KPIs, then we take away a lot of selfishness, we take away a lot of reinvention of the wheel, we take away some of the fear of failure that are absolutely rampant in organizations. And we create this network and connection, which I think once people know that they don't have to know everything, they just have to know someone who does know something a bit more than them, power to your elbow. And it makes work really exciting. Makes you want to go to work because you're jumping into this living pool of insight and knowledge. It's fantastic. Instead of going into work on your own, sitting at a computer, never talking to anyone, doing a Zoom call where you're being berated for not having delivered something or berating someone else for not having delivered something. Miserable, horrible existence. So I want to make work better.
Buttons and being told you've consumed e-learning, so you've learned now.
Exactly. What a nonsense. And also the fact that you've consumed e-learning on your own. And even if the person next to you knows 25 times more, doesn't matter. You've got to do it on your own because you can't combine your joint insights to make 2 and 2 add up to 26. No. 2 and 2 have got to add up to 3. That's the way organizations operate.
There's something you said about organizational knowledge, and you used that term a couple of times, and I feel it as well. So as somebody who both researched and worked in a hyper growth firm and in on this age of AI and machine learning, and we have such smart employees doing incredible things that we cannot imagine as L&D people, and we don't understand, in all fairness. And they're somehow learning, creating, breaking amongst themselves, and then we trudge along and go, oh no. This is how you learn. There's something, I don't know whether we're foolhardy about us, where we believe that somehow we are custodians of not only the organizational knowledge, but also how people learn within it. It's ridiculous.
Crazy. There's a chapter in the book, which is a case study with Jeff Stead. And Jeff runs a software development team he is in charge of product at his company. So they've got loads of engineers, and he said that they couldn't exist as a team without learning. That's what they do all the time, sharing new ideas, sharing new routines, sharing how to use AI to help them code. Whole engineered environment of constant debate. And then he has days where they just take time off and look at what they've done and say, how could we do that better? What do we need to know that we don't know now? What do we need to know that isn't shared amongst the team? So they do all of that stuff. And he says, and then comes L&D, and they say, everyone has to do this compulsory course because it's really important for the organization. And he said, at the very best, it's a diversion. At the very worst, it's a total waste of time. So they kind of grit their teeth, get on with it, and then get back to real learning, which is, how do we do this? How do we do that? So, it's incredible without really deliberately setting out. He's built this organizational learning network in the company, and it's incredibly powerful. And he said that's why people stay, because software engineers, you can get a job anywhere if you're any good. So his people stay not because of the great coding opportunities, but because of the great discussion. And I think that's really insightful. Johnny Ive said about design, he said, at the end of a project, what's much more important than the product is what we learned. And I think, yes, because what you learn builds the next product and gets better and builds the next one. The product is just, well, that's good and that's done. But it's what we've learned. So, that's the philosophy that sort of underpins the book.
And it makes complete sense, because then it also means that
good. Excellent.
No, of course it does. Because but you're actually saying that the power to build this learning network, these connections, doesn't need to sit with one individual. And if L&D must exist at all, their job then changes from building content and courses
to empowering, facilitating, engineering, building the learning ecosystem, which people can use to do all of those things. So, I built the book around 5 values. Can I just share those with you? Because you can throw your hands up in horror and say, what? So the first value is that you need relevant and helpful work systems and processes. So part of someone's role, whether it's L&D or someone else, probably not L&D, but it should be, is to go through and filter out things that stop you doing good work, stop you connecting, stop you getting insights, stop you planning, stop you solving problems. So, and that's not a task you finish, it's a task that's never ending. Is this system fit for purpose? Can we find a better one to replace it? The second one is, and I may get a lot of flack for this, but I think it's important, value decency and human kindness. Because I don't see how, if you are scared, if you're in contempt, if you're treated contemptuously, why would you bother going the extra mile? Why would you do anything more than the absolute minimum to get out the door as early as possible during the day? So I kept coming back to decency and human kindness, which may put me out on a limb. And the third value is it's about teams and group working, because I think that the unit has got to be replaced with single unit. It's got to be replaced by the group. Said that already. And if you think like that, we attach people into teams. New person comes, you attach them into the group, and the group helps them develop and the group supports them. And you don't say you have to know everything. You just need to know your bit, and you connect with everyone else. There's a wonderful research article about cognition and consciousness. And the person says, where does a blind man's consciousness end? It's not in his brain or his body. It's at the end of his stick. His stick is his consciousness. And it's no more inappropriate to say that the stick is his consciousness than your eyes taking a part of your consciousness. So, external things can be part of our consciousness. And if you've got a team of really fantastically well thought of, well respected, great people, that's your consciousness. That's your kind of community from which you learn. It's your external brain in a way. So these ideas that it's the individual has to memorize stuff, it's not true. It's your external brain. And the stronger that network is, the better the product is at the end of the day. 5, last one, and I'm going to stop.
No, this is great.
Value agility and flexibility in work and work practices. So continuously judge yourself by how agile you are, how good your work practices are to deliver that kind of agility and flexibility and resilience, I guess, as well, because all of those things will help you survive in the world. So that they're the 5 values, and I just think they come together. So not one of them, well, one of them does, but they don't all say organizational learning is, you've got to learn 16 things every Monday, or it's all about this learning structure. You need a very good LMS. It doesn't mention any of those things, because at the end of the day, they're completely irrelevant. If you've got the values right, everything falls into place.
The agility and resilience, I think, looking at organizations, we both know there are more organizations forming, startups, merging, being acquired, and then even collapsing at a faster rate than ever before. And I think there are many factors which contribute to this. But if you don't have this idea of agility, of being able to pivot, of being able to change how you're learning and change what it is you are doing, and then quickly adapting and moving on, I would think that would be one of the reasons, not only for individual or team failure, but actually organizational failure as well.
Yes, absolutely.
What's scary is that as most learning professionals, that we don't focus on that at all. And if I ask somebody, what are you doing to make sure your organization is more agile? And probably talk about a list of courses they offer in
exactly how to be agile
methodology, because by now we've intermingled everything.
Exactly. How to be agile level 1, how to be agile level 2. It's beyond ridiculous.
At the end of it, that you can stick to your email signature. How cool is that?
Yes, exactly. Crazy stuff. So out of all of this, I built a model, and I've shown the model to a lot of people. And the one thing that consistently, particularly CLOs, have said to me is, what the model's okay. It's about connection, building an organizational brain, linking people together, networks, learning spaces. He said, yeah, that's all. That's fine. The thing that's most important about it, there are 2 arrows that reach out into the environment, and they're saying one of the says you have to align your culture with the outside environment. So when the environment changes, your culture should change. And the second is building connections with outside. So you're flooded with insight from outside. You never imagine that you know more than the world out there that you live in. And everyone should have some way of finding some attachment and sharing that knowledge. So that's the insight really in the model, that it's about belonging inside and connections and attachments outside that make organizational learning come alive. It isn't an internal thing. It is internal, but it's also an external thing. It's about the connection. So the organization is relevant, the organization learns more, and eventually, if it all works, the organization knows what it knows. That's, in some ways, that's the ultimate, being in an organization that knows what it knows, because then you can just tap in very, very quickly to everything the organization knows. And that does not happen in most organizations. It's the exact opposite.
I think what concerns me is that often organizations know what they know. We just don't know what organizations know. So
yes,
bear with me. I don't know how many of us, and I think it's such a vital skill, understand how the firms we work in fundamentally make money,
exactly.
or see the opportunity cost of moving people out of their day jobs to what we define as learning or training.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering, therefore, and for those of people who don't know, they've probably been living under a rock. But for me, Nigel has done everything that you possibly can. You've been a chief learning officer at the BBC. You've been a thought leader in the true aspect and a researcher in the true aspect. And then you consult and put into practice what you've researched on and what you see back in organizations. So it's constantly relevant. And so now I'm asking you, because I do believe that there is a very good chance that either this title or this role in its current form L&D might not, actually will not exist, if I'm completely honest. I'm not entirely sure that this learning and development custodian leader role. So if we start going back to all the concepts that you've just mentioned about organizational frameworks, and they fundamentally know how they learn, they fundamentally know what they need to do to succeed, what should then be the role of whatever we call this person in the future, whether it continues to be the head of learning, people leader, talent leader? What should this leader of people's role be in order to foster these five values, and that element of connectivity with the business?
Um, it's basically a lubrication job. That their job is to keep the wheels moving and ensure that everything is fit for purpose. So they're in some ways they're servants to the learning of the organization. They are not the learning of the organization. That's the distinction. So that if you've got a dynamic model where you are trying to build learning spaces, connect people, connect ideas, and build what I call the organizational brain, some group, some individual has to be responsible for optimizing that. As things change, as the organization evolves, then someone needs to do that. So I think that is what, whether you call it L&D or anything else, that's their job, is to, in some ways, light the blue touch paper and get the hell out. It's not their job to do someone's learning or control it or tell them what to do or intervene when they've got other things that they need to focus on. It is very much to empower the organization to help itself learn. And you're never going to get learning all around an organization led by five people. Now, if you've got 10,000 people in an organization, you say, oh, these five can manage the entire learning and tell people what they've got to do. It's just saying that makes you realize how ridiculous it is. But if you empower those 9,000 people to work it out themselves, to work in small groups, to set learning targets, to work out what's wrong and what worked that they could optimize, what worked that they need to share, and what was wrong that they need to change, they can do that. So, it says on the cover, if I just, the back of the cover, the last, I just read this because I can't remember it, even though I wrote it. The last sentence is, as we move forward, learning embedded in and emerging from work will become more and more inextricably linked with success in uncertain times. So it's
Love
embedding
that
in
that
work.
sentence, learning emerging from work. We know this,
Yes.
right? I mean, we inherently
Yes.
know this. It's the same thing, what we call experiential learning. It's the same thing we call of learning by doing. It is the same thing which goes, this is what I do in my daily life. What am I learning that makes it better? And what am I learning that makes myself better to do in doing it? We inherently know this, and somehow I'm not even sure when it happened. We either forgot or it didn't become important to measure or tie into performance or to think about impact of. I don't know when we lost the plot, but I don't think we have much time to stay lost anymore.
Well, not if organizations are going to thrive, because it's tough times. That some of the things that are being thrown at medium, small, and large companies are really curveballs. And if you're not drawing on the smarts of everyone you employ, you imagine that an executive team of six can solve all the problems, or even an executive team plus the next layer of 50 can solve all the problems. You're just an idiot. It's just not possible. The people often who've got the biggest insights are those closest to the coalface. You ask the salespeople, you ask the support staff, what are you seeing? What are we learning? And if that insight is churned around and processed, the organization is much more likely to be able to work it out and make the changes necessary quickly. It's about speed, I think, at the moment. But in so many organizations, it's as if, and people tell you, I just don't count in here. You're a VP. I don't count. I'm not an EVP. Only the EVPs count in this place. And you're like, this is just crazy. Just crazy. So smart people get up and leave because they feel they've got no insight, no stake in the organization. The organization owes them nothing and they owe it nothing. So you get this constant churn. If you focus on individuals, and even if you say, Serena, you are talent. We are going to invest in you. You are the future of this organization. What that does is if you don't see that, that your greatness is based on other people and what they do with you, how you animate them, how they animate you, how they give you information and insight, how you work in that maybe many teams. If you can't see that, you think it's all about me. Why stay? If they think you're talent, go somewhere else who think you're talent times two. So you end up with this churn of really good people who never really embed in the organization because they're not allowed to in many ways. And you get this double tier of there's everyone and then there's talent. And that to me has to be wrong because, well, but there's lots of research to prove that people who are very successful have networks of support. You take the network of support away, they're not very successful. It's logical to me. So build the networks, build them consciously, and make people recognize that they're in a network of support. So they stay because the place is a great place to work. People will stay. People will be loyal if they thought the organization was going to show them loyalty, but mostly it doesn't. And therefore they don't care. They feel, I'm just expendable. I'm a fungible asset, gone here today, gone tomorrow. When you should be saying you're not a fungible asset. You've got real insights and you've got history. You've got something in this organization which we won't be able to replace. No one is ever told that. No one, except a chief executive occasion. And it's usually not true. But for the real glue in an organization, they're not told they're glue. They're not told that we need you to hang around. You hold it all together. They're the people we should be looking at. And part of L&D's job, or part of talent's job, is to recognize those connectors and the connections in the organization and strengthen them or enhance them.
Yeah.
That's important.
I do think that, and therefore at a fundamental level, is also the appreciation of other people who do that connection, right? I always go, we somehow are this bucket where you design and you develop and you deliver training and thank you very much. And then, but there's other people who are actually bringing in that talent, managers who have the most in-depth knowledge of the people, and we use talent as a broad generic term, not as a subset of employees, who know their talent best, but are never really consulted that much. We're not in touch with how people perform. We're not linking it back to organizational performance. So then it becomes, hey, there's all of these networks that I could be creating, which collectively would enhance team efficiency and team knowledge and organizational efficiency and organizational performance, but I've not placed myself as anywhere in this entire cycle because I do this. And I do firmly believe that we're going to be in more and more organizations which don't have the luxury for somebody to just do this.
Yes.
And that's where
I think so.
Yeah, and I think that's where we pinned ourselves. You have this very cool thing that you said, and I do stalk you ever so often, when you were talking about how employees develop and transition, and you came up with this concept of leaky roles. And I really, and a toothpaste tube. I love the entire analogy, but it sounds best coming from you, and I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about.
It struck me, and it is slightly ludicrous, but it still makes sense. To me, it does anyway. That if you have all your roles are like toothpaste tubes, they're hermetically sealed, and you let out bits of your talent, you squeeze bits of your talent out. But essentially, the toothpaste tube is a toothpaste tube. My view is that you should have toothpaste tubes with slits down the side, so that you are continuously adapting and learning new skills, absorbing new ideas and making your role bigger. So while you're doing one role, you're actually preparing for the next. Once you're doing one role, you are looking at adjacent areas and looking at areas where you can transition. So no one is locked in a job and therefore is deeply resistant when you say, well, this job will have to change. Well, no, this is my job. I've done it for 5 years. That is criminal in some ways in this day and age. So everyone should be like a toothpaste tube that's slit down the side, and your insight should be oozing out, and you should be linking in with other areas, and that makes you more strong and competent, and it makes you believe in change. It makes you believe that the issue is I can learn. Tell me where I go. Help me move in this direction. Not I am terrified because this is what I know, and I'm not sure I know anything else. And we are full of fearful people in organizations, scared of being humiliated, scared of making a mistake, scared of being shown up, scared of being moved to somewhere where they feel they're not good, scared of upsetting bosses, scared of revealing the truth about themselves. They're all walking around in masks. And I just think that is such a waste of productivity, human productivity. And it's human decency and kindness. Back to that. If you wake up every morning and you kind of dread going to work, or you consciously put on this phony mask just to prove that you're someone who you're not really, because you daren't admit who you are or what you know and what you don't know, that's a criminal waste of human capacity, I think. Yeah. So, it's got to be different. And leaky toothpaste tube is the first way. Get rid of these. Why do we need such rigid job descriptions? How many people have you ever said to you, that's not really in my job description? As if that means I can't do it. I refuse.
Whenever people talk about the skills-based organization, this is the bit where it always assumes that there's a linear set of skills assumed associated with a singular job, and then the progression therefore is linear, because there is this, and everyone believes that, oh, if I tackle this skills problem with training, then people can do again that. And you're right, there's no side. Nobody looks on the side. Nobody looks as holistically as how human beings. On one side, we all know that continuous learning, and we will that those linear phases of our lives where we, and now I'm going off on a tangent, where you're born, you study, you work, you die. That's gone. There's you're born, you study, you work, you study, you work, you study, you learn, learning, and then yes, you'll die. That's the only certainty right now. But if we know inherently that there is this constant learning ability, why is it still that singular toothpaste tube, which assumes that you will come out from one end knowing X and move out to the next knowing Y?
Exactly. And also
your analogy by trying to make a point.
And also saying, stick to your toothpaste tube. Don't get ideas above your station. You're this toothpaste tube. You're not that toothpaste tube. It's just awful. But yet, maybe your analogy: you're born, you study, you work, you're reborn, you work, you study more, you're reborn. We're reincarnated. We should be reincarnated 4 or 5 times, 5 or 6 times in our lives, and do things completely differently. Now, you are not the person you were at 18. I didn't meet you when you were 18, but I will almost guarantee that you are not that same person, and you wouldn't want to be. I would die if I confronted my 18-year-old self, or in some ways the opinions I had as a CLO in the BBC are totally different now. I grew up beyond it, and I made lots of mistakes, and I had some crazy fixed notions in my head, which I wouldn't in a second do now. So I've been reborn and reborn and reborn as I've gone through. And it's because no one's told me you can't do that. And the problem is, in many organizations, we tell people you can't do that. This is what you do. Just stick to it. For goodness sake, what is the matter with you? Stick to it. Do what you're supposed to do. No, don't worry about that. That's not your job. These things are debilitating in organizations. Ultimately, I think they're carcinogenic. They just eat into the organizational body, corporate, and eventually bring it down, bring it to its knees.
I think it's that balance that we haven't got right. We forget sometimes that because a level of hierarchy, and I don't like that word, but there's a level of structure needed in organizations. But we forget that within that, it's a living, breathing organism.
Yes.
And we're channeling towards a goal or a common set of goals. And I think that's the bit that we forget. So the moment you have to leave the rigidity, L&D, actually a lot of people functions, we don't know what to do next because governance and compliance is easy. Frameworks and systems thinking and operating within a space and pivoting and it's scary because you keep going. If I stop reporting on X, if I stop attaching my value to happy sheets and butts on seats and consumption on content on an LMS, what am I here for? And moving away from that thinking is it's scary.
It is very scary. But if you don't look at the underlying issues, if you don't look at why, and then why happened, and why happened, if you don't start to explore those levels of complexity in an organization, you're ultimately pretty low level. You're just functional. Whereas I think that in this role, you have the power to actually make the organization. And I've always felt that organizations are organic. You know, that there was a systems re-engineering, which was very fashionable in the 90s, was a total disaster because it assumes that organizations were machines. You could just put them apart, oil them a bit, make them a bit more sophisticated, put them back together again, and they work a lot better. And all you did was destroy the organization. Because I used to say, is an organization a bicycle or a frog? And I take votes on it. And my belief is that an organization is much more like a frog. That if you take it apart and try and put it back together again, it tends never to work as well as it did in the first place. And that's no wonder, because all the bits are connected. Whereas if you see an organization as just slices of, it's like one of the management gurus who shifted his perspective said, I now see organizations not like a butcher sees a cow, as a flank and a sirloin, and it's not like that. It's a cow. It's a living, breathing, belching, and whatever else it does, beast. And you understand a cow not by looking at the bits, but by looking at the whole. And in some ways, you understand an organization by looking at the whole, not looking at the bits. And if the bits are just learning, then it's a reducto view of the world. It's dangerous, I think. So yes, it's a systems view, and it's hard. And I'm not saying this is a doddle, because I'm saying delve into complexity. But I have two things which are really important. One is that you need to do field work. L&D does not do enough field work. They believe what people tell them. Oh, there's a sales training problem. Go and sort it. No problem. I'll go and sort that out next week. Who knows what the sales problem is, but it may well be nothing whatsoever to do with training. And probably is unlikely to be anything to do with training. It's probably got psycho manager, or there's a dysfunctional way, or the processes are really bad. So if you go in there and you do your field work, which is observe, ask questions, observe again, and draw some arbitrary conclusions, share those with people who know what they're talking about, you eventually see that this is the problem that we have to solve, and you solve the problem. You don't just give them a bit of training because that get everyone off the hook, and it does. It gets everyone off the hook. I'm a great L&D person. I gave them some training. I'm a great head of sales because I asked for training and got it. It's just complacent and naive, really, to think that is the way you solve problems. It's like in the software company saying to the L&D people, just go away. Just don't come in with your courses and programs, however well you've designed them, how much instructional design there is. We've got our own learning agenda, thank you very much, and it's doing pretty well at the moment. So you got to get into the entrails, the visceral bits of an organization, which is always challenging and sometimes full of uncomfortable truths. But if you don't understand the uncomfortable truths, you can't fix anything. So I think there's a lot of fixing to be done, and someone's got to do it. I don't know quite who, whether that maybe that's L&D, but it may be L&D plus or some other kind of function has got to be able to fix the organization. And I think most organizations need fixing. There's very few that you can say that leave them alone. They're doing fine. They're mostly struggling, and the people in them, even worse, the people in them are struggling. And that's what breaks my heart, when you see good people who are struggling, stressed, fraught, under pressure, depressed. Good people, intelligent people would give their life and soul to the organization, but they're just held back and forced down routes they don't want to go down, do work that they're ashamed of rather than not even neutral about. They're not proud of. They're not doing good work. They're prevented from doing good work. They're not close to the customer. And just as you said, they don't understand the way the organization works. If you don't understand how the organization works, how on earth can you even begin to fix it? You can't. Surely I'm not completely mad and that I've just missed something. Someone's going to say, no, you just missed this. Like, oh, yes, of course. The whole thesis of my book falls on the ground. From all of the conversations I've had and all of the organizations I've looked at and all of the research that I've read, I don't think I'm wrong. But The world will tell me, I
I
suppose.
do believe, no, Nigel, you're absolutely right. And more so because, I've looked at a subset and I've looked at more of the startups and the scale ups and the new companies and the ones forming and building and all on the back of new technology, fintech and biotech and all of these areas. And most of these founders and most of the people coming into them and investing into them are fundamentally those who, above everything, don't want to stifle the creativity of an
Yes.
organization. That's fundamental. And they know that they have to get to a stage as you expand where you need that level of organization structure. When you go beyond of selling to friends, family, network, word of mouth, and you're getting to a point where you might be going on in for an IPO, or you might be putting yourself out to a PE buyer, but you now have to move to the stage where you're not the guys on over an ironing board in a barn. You now have an organization. And the idea that they know that, and what they're looking for are people leaders, and we can debate whether this is HR, L&D, talent, whatever, people leaders who can still keep that flow going, that excitement of that creativity of making that product and building your knowledge and perfecting that product in a framework, to use your word, without stifling that creativity. I know I need an organization, but I don't want to stifle my people. And you
Yes.
you have another analogy called a gyroscope, which I'm hoping this
Yes.
this sort of alludes to. As people leaders in the broad gamut, we have to think about how organizations of tomorrow will be, and therefore what are the skills we need to adapt this new way of organization, which is looking at a more systems way of operating, which is looking to you for frameworks and structure, but they're not looking at you for rigid pathways and tunnels.
100%. You're absolutely right. I use the analogy because it always struck me as a pilot. If you're piloting a jet plane, it is a system. Above all, you are living systems thinking as a pilot, because on the one hand, you've got all the base stuff is kind of looking after itself. If the plane is going well, it's flying itself essentially. So what are you doing? You're looking at the detail of where the plane is in the sky, and you're making sure that the adjustments that are being made are the right adjustments. Now, every plane has loads of gyroscopes, and without a gyroscope in a plane, it's hard to see how it could really fly. And gyroscopes have been in planes since a long, long time ago. But essentially, the gyroscope creates the artificial horizon. So the pilot's looking at all the instruments, and they think that they're going in the right direction. But they look at the gyroscope, they look at the horizon and say, yep, we should be going this amount above or this amount below the horizon or this amount left or this amount right. They know where they are in space. And that it might be in thick cloud, they might be in fog, they might be in pitch darkness, but that gyroscope tells the pilot where they are. Now, my analogy from the gyroscope is that organizations need an organizational gyroscope. They need a way of being able to see what's going on and adjust. And I think it's learning is the organizational gyroscope. Because if you've got enough data coming in, enough insight, that the people who are piloting the organization can see where that horizon is and that they're going too high, too low, or they're flying straight into the sea, and they can make big adjustments or small adjustments to keep on the right track. So that's why I said it. And a gyroscope, once it stops spinning, is a lump of metal. It doesn't do anything. And it's really, in my little gyroscope, it's really heavy and it's clumsy. You spin it and it's light and airy, and it sits on the top of my finger, sits on a pinhead, and I can move my hand and it adjusts automatically. It's full of energy. So I think that learning is energy in the organization, because once you feel you're on top of the environment that you're in, it's a great feeling. And that energy that is shared around the organization is really powerful, I think. So that was my gyroscope analogy. So we've had gyroscopes and gliders, I think I mentioned at the beginning, and toothpaste tubes. Are there any more crazinesses in my head? Possibly.
I do have another loaded question for you, but it's loaded only because I know you've researched and written on this for years. What would you say, in the 10 odd minutes we've got left, what would you say is the the role and the skills? What tips can you give all of us who sit in the human resources, the people function, on building cultures of psychological safety? We alluded to that. I know we're both fans of Dr. Amy Edmondson, and the culture of psychological safety, the culture of continuous learning, the culture of experimentation, and the culture of tapping into organizational knowledge, if I can summarize the big buckets you went through. What would you say we need to do, and what skills do we need to build in order to do that? So anything that you can tell us on organizational culture, because all of this then comes down to creating that culture in the organization.
Well, you won't do it by just reading books about learning. I really think that you've got to start to expand your horizons and be sensitive to what's going on in organizational development theory, psychology, sometimes philosophy and sociology. There are lots of people having big thoughts out there. And if you don't plug into them, say, oh, I'm a learning person, what's the latest thought on learning? You're going to miss all of those big waves of insight that you should allow wash over you. I think that actually, in terms of skills, that there are 3 or 4 that are really important. The first one is that the skill of doing field work, knowing how you do field work, and being able to really understand what's going on and take action as a result of that. So it's not just walking up to someone saying, how are you getting on? Oh, I'm doing fine, but X is useless. Right, that's insight. Thank you so much. It's not that. It's standing and watching and asking more than one question and gradually building up a picture over time. So you understand the organization. Your point at the beginning, the skill to really understand the organization. The second thing is see yourself as a practitioner. And if you're a practitioner, you have to improve your practice. So just like a yoga teacher doesn't stay exactly the way they were 5 years ago. They've gone on, they've done more courses, they've understood some of the more deep and profound things about yoga, and they've improved their practice as a result. So be a practitioner and improve your practice. The third is curiosity. Just try and go beyond your narrow domain. The toothpaste tube, split that toothpaste tube. L&D manager, split it and go and find out what lies next to you. What are the adjacent skills? And try to grab hold of those and talk to people doing other jobs. Be curious about what's going on in other organizations, and don't imagine that you've got all the answers. You can learn from all sorts of people. And that curiosity, why is that happening? But why is that happening? Why did that do that led to this, that led to that? Try to be a double loop thinker, that you're looking at the underlying issues, not the superficial issues. And I this is going to sound crazy, but I think you need a skill of writing things down. So many people, as soon as they get to a certain level in an organization, never write anything. That, I had doctoral students coming in saying, I have to confess, I haven't written more than half a page for the last 5 years or 6 years or 10 years. Someone else writes my stuff for me. And you say, right, okay, fine, good, you're senior. But what you've got to start doing is doing it yourself. It doesn't have to be shown to anyone. But I think being able to conceptualize and frame and formulate and trying to work out what you know and what you don't know is an incredibly useful skill. And that will stand you in fantastic stead going forward. And it's painful, that if you haven't written anything more than half a page for 5 years or 10 years, by golly, it's going to be painful, but the rewards are enormous, absolutely enormous. And even if you don't want to show it to everybody, there will be other people you can show it to, you trust, and say, look, I'm trying to get my head around this. What do you think of that? And they'll say, but you've missed that, and you've missed that. Real insight and real big picture stuff. So look and assume the big picture, not the narrow picture, and don't take orders. Don't take orders from anybody. Question everything. You can be gently knock the order takers away by asking reasonable questions and say, well, that's really interesting. Do you mind if I talk to 1 or 2 people? I need to explore that in more depth. That's not offensive. You don't say, I'm not taking orders from you. That's offensive. You just don't take any answers that you haven't validated in any way. And I suppose the last one is just get to know how data works, how data comes through, how you can understand data, how data can be your friend and servant. and not your yoke and burden. Oh, I've got to do it. And if you can't create data maps, get people who can. Your job is to interpret them, try and understand the data.
I've if you spend enough time looking at the data before you have designed anything, before you have tackled any nail with a learning hammer, if you just spend the time doing your research in the organization and analyzing the data, you will never need to justify whatever intervention you then choose, whichever route you go down, because you have done your homework before. And it comes back to the field work, and it comes back to just going. I like saying that we are the go build a course where the yes sir 3 bags full sir, because
Yes.
would that be, is that classroom or virtual? And without going back and going, I need to think about this. Is this a skill issue? Is this a learning problem? Do you have, to your point about sales, do you have the market data which shows you that our product is fine, our customers are fine, our, all of this, all ceteris paribus, other things being equal, should we deliver this piece of learning or put our salespeople through this, there will be different results. We do not do enough of field work. We don't do enough of intra-organizational research. We really are. And then we wonder why we are order takers, and we wonder why we don't have, I hate this phrase, the seat at the table.
Yes.
Because we positioned ourselves that way,
Yes, completely. Yeah, you
ourselves.
put yourself under the table, not just not at the table. You're under the table. You're like, that when Henry VIII used to when they used to have feasts in the Middle Ages, they would deliberately throw their food on the floor when they'd finished, half of it eaten, half of it not eaten, for the next lot to come and eat. So they are off the floor, and that's where we if you position yourself as someone who eats off the floor, then fine, great. But I don't want to be there. I want to be at the table and have the first pickings and understand the gourmet meal in front of me, not just the half-eaten bits on the floor. But so many people are quite happy to be on the floor. And the people in Henry VIII's time didn't have a choice. We have a choice. We have a choice.
At the same time, you're not going to, if you keep, the sentence I use, if you keep putting out the same bait, you're going to catch the same fish. So if you
Yes.
have the same offering that has never changed in 20 years, if your offering is centered around what it is that I can deliver so you can look good, if my offering is I'm an edutainer, because somehow entertaining people has become part of how you deliver learning, then you're going to be invited when that particular skill or intervention is needed, which is
Yes.
at the end, at the bottom of the table.
Yes. Yes.
Why will I invite you to sit down with me when I know what you're going to give me is not going to change whether you're at the beginning of the food chain or the end of it?
Yes.
And I think that's the bit that hasn't fully sunk in with us. And where HR is more evolving to now, this idea of business partnering, used to be very different. It used to be how can I fix your problems? Is it a
Yes.
contractual issue? Is it a compliance
Yes.
issue?
How can I sweep up the mess?
How can I sweep up
Yep,
the
I'll get in. There's a really big mess there. Leave it to me. I'll sort it out. I'll sweep it up. Everything tactical, everything reactive. Yes,
and
and
now it's
we're
moving
kind of
this
like
whole,
that in L&D in a way.
exactly.
Still,
And now moving to this, all these concepts from management consulting around trusted advisors, no vendors, no
yes,
problem solvers, no scrapers, no end of the
yes,
table solution givers, but
yes,
moving back to your research into the problem. What's keeping you up at night? What's bothering you here today? And I don't think we ever stopped to place ourselves there. And then we wonder, why we've got the scraps. It's kind of weird. It's a bit,
it is
but
kind of weird.
bait you
And
catch.
if you think of your own life, there are people you trust who you listen to, and people that you take with a pinch of salt. And that's your aspiration, that you want to be the person that others trust and listen to, and not someone who's taken with a pinch of salt or has got an agenda or is just peddling a piece of software. All of these things I think are important, not just for the organization's survival, but for your own sanity in a way. Everyone wants to feel they're making a difference and they want to contribute. And so few people allow themselves to get in a position where they can do that. And that will be my hope, that they read this book and they go, whoa, I can do things differently here. So I suppose, that's what we ought to end on, saying this book, The Great Reset, Unlocking the Power of Organizational Learning, is
I was
available
my question, what is the
later
name
this
of this
month.
book and where do I get it?
And it's available as a Kindle ebook, as an Apple ebook, or as a book, as a print book as well. So I really hope people read it, and I very much would welcome their comments, good and bad. I'm sure there will be bad as well as good. I
Oh,
hope
but
there are
that's
some good.
engagement, right? And there's nothing, and I will take engagement, and I know you think this way as well. I will take engagement, feedback, and conversation any day over apathy, and because that makes me irrelevant. And all of us want to be relevant, and we want to know what we're saying is valid, and it is meant to be challenged because that's how we all learn together. But I cannot think of. I believe this will be flawless, Nigel, and it will spark debate, spark it should spark debate, and it will spark, more importantly, a kind of change in how we are thinking and dealing in organizations. So it's called the Great Reset, and there's
A
another
great
part.
reset, unlocking the power of organizational learning. Yes, the great reset.
I am
That's what
looking.
we need. So I think that's what we need.
I am.
Not just tinkering around the edges.
I agree because and we've used this word before as well. The tinkering is gone. We will become a luxury, and then we will move to
Mm.
irrelevance. So if we do not reset both ourselves and our context in the organization, I don't believe we have the right, never mind the ability to exist for firms of the future.
I think so. It was Edwards Deming who said that survival is not mandatory. It's true.
We'll be like the dodos,
Yes,
the dodos of the organizational world.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Nigel,
Anyway, thank you so much.
so
Thank you.
much. I really, really appreciate this. I know that there will be many more of these conversations to come. So I truly appreciate you being here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Serena. Thank you very much for the invitation. I really do appreciate it.